So I don't know about you, but I have coded so many apps as part of just a weekend project or a little proof of concept. I want to maybe learn a new skill or try one of these tools out. And I've got a ton of little sandbox toys or little apps that I can run in my development environment and just do something real quick. This is really good. It's a great way to learn new things. But man, I will tell you what, I have serious imposter syndrome because I don't actually have anything that I have personally created in production. Everything I've ever done still runs in a development environment, if I'm lucky, if I can remember how to start the scripts up again, but I don't have anything that I could just whip out my phone and go to a real life production website. I don't have any apps I've deployed. And honestly, I have never exactly even been sure of the steps I needed to take to do that. But because we have things like Claude Code and Google CLI and Codex, it is insane that I don't have something running in production. I decided this has to be a surmountable problem, even though I still don't know exactly what to do or what even needs to be done, but I figure that these tools can help me get multiple steps closer, if not 100% of the way there. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to take the steps that I have never taken before to get me closer to being in production. So everything I'm doing today, I'm using Claude to do. But there is no reason you couldn't use any other command line coding system to do this. All of the systems these days are smart enough that you can talk to them and ask them to do the steps you need to do, and they should be able to know exactly what you're talking about and install the packages you might need and build the things that you're requesting. All right, so the first step is making sure I have a solid repo. In a nutshell, a repo is just a place where you can store your code. You can check in different versions of it. So if you do something that kind of breaks it in a way that you can't undo, you can always revert back to an older version. So one of the most popular and common ones you'll hear about is Git. This is just something you can install right on your computer. In fact, this is something you can ask Claude to install right on your computer. And then as you're working on your project, you can literally just ask Claude to make sure everything is checked into Git. And it will go and check to see if you already have a repository created. If you don't, it will create one for you. It will stage all the files and get them ready to be checked in and commit all the files. If you don't know what all those words mean, it's okay because Claude does. It is basically just getting everything ready to be backed up into this repository system for you. There's sort of a little README file that Claude will take care of writing, and this just has sort of information about the project and how you would install it or build it or use it. So this really is like 20 times easier than it ever was in the past. All right, so having Git installed is a really good step, and in fact, that's kind of where I was at with most of my projects. I had Claude create repos and checking stuff in and committing my code, but having recently just moved to a new laptop, I knew I was only one hard drive failure away from losing all my code. Because that Git system is local to your machine, if you lose the machine somehow, hard drive goes bad, or if you just change machines in the future and you forget you needed to move that repository over, that code is gone. That's where GitHub comes in. GitHub is like a cloud storage system for Git. The best way to think of it is just all of your projects that are backed up in Git are now stored in the cloud and you can access them later. So I knew this was important. So I went over to ChatGPT and asked, how do I integrate GitHub and Claude? Because I really wasn't sure what the parts were that I needed to do. This was mistake number one on my part. Because these tools are so new, not GitHub, but Claude and just how you interact with it in general, ChatGPT got a little confused. Basically was telling me how I would use GitHub in a terminal, I think. And Claude just kept telling me, I'm trying to connect with GitHub. I need you to log in and authenticate. So it would bring up a browser. I would log into my GitHub account. And I just kept going in circles. And the error messages were like, you're getting an authentication problem. I don't know what to tell you. So after a few days had passed, I thought, I'll give this another shot, but I'm just going to ask Claude to do it. So I went back into Claude and I said, could you make sure this is in GitHub? And it literally just turned around and said, okay, everything's now in GitHub. And I think because I had been working with it, there was some login information or connection that did get made that first time, but it was flawless. So that's really two notes for myself. One, if I'm working with really new technology, I can't necessarily rely on an LLM to be able to answer very specific questions about how to use it. And the other thing I need to remember is Claude is itself an LLM. I don't know why I didn't just ask Claude in the first place how to use Claude. So avoid my mistake and just go ahead and ask the tool you're using, hey, can you do this? In just whatever natural language you normally would. So now I've got my code in a repository and in the cloud, so it is backed up in case something goes wrong. But the news gets even better than that, because as I understand it, if I have let's say a web app that I want to deploy to production, there are servers out there where I can just point my code base and for free, it will host my web app. And one of the features of these systems is something called CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, or continuous delivery. So this means as you're creating changes to your project and you're checking it into Git and pushing it up to the cloud, the server that's hosting your project will be notified when a change is made, and it will be redeployed out there in production in sort of real time. I think there's some testing that goes on behind the scenes and some checks to make sure there's no bugs. This part I am very fuzzy on, in case you can't tell. I have not looked into this enough, but I do know that in order to use that, it's a benefit to me to have my code out on GitHub, because that will then feed into this system of easier deployment. So that is a score for me for sure. All right, so my next problem, testing. I mean, that's not really a problem. If I'm building an app, I test it, but I just go around and start clicking on the things that I think it should do and see if anything obvious breaks. That's pretty good, but it's not exactly what I would call complete. So my current little toy app that I'm working on is just a little Magic 8-Ball web app, but instead of the standard Magic 8-Ball answers, it gives you answers based on Yogi Bear's quotes. Should I turn left or right? Shake the ball, and you get an answer. I usually take a 2-hour nap from 1 to 4. Yep, that's working as designed. And in this example, I mean, it's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of things that can go wrong, but it does need to be tested, and I'm not going to think of all the use cases to test it. So this is another thing that I knew I needed Claude to do for me. So I have certainly asked Claude in the past to test the code for me, but I was never real specific. I knew it was doing some unit testing, but I didn't ever really put much effort into it. So I heard there is this tool called Playwright. And it is a user interface tool, and it will open up a series of browsers and test all the functionality on a web app. So all the buttons, all the text fields, all the drop downs, everything that can be done, it will go out and actually test them. So I asked Claude to create a series of both unit tests, which are just tests that test all the individual functionality in your project. But then I also asked Claude to create a suite of tests for the interface using Playwright. And so Claude created this whole series of everything from unit tests all the way through to full web app functionality testing. And we can see that in the claude.md file, the markdown file. This is sort of the project brain behind Claude. And it's got a whole section in here for testing. It did a whole bunch of unit tests using something called Jest, which I had never heard of, but apparently is a very common unit testing tool. And it will run several different versions of unit testing, depending on what's called for. And then it's got end-to-end tests using Playwright. So Playwright can run all of its tests without actually opening browsers. So it can run it kind of like in the background and just test all the functionality. So I got all 70 Playwright tests passed across all browsers. So weirdly to me, this was one of the biggest hurdles. All the testing that I knew really needed to be done was really daunting to me, and I really had no idea how to tackle it. So I was, for some reason, still surprised that I could just ask Claude to create an entire end-to-end suite of tests, and it would just handle everything for me. So now we've got a fully cloud-based backed up repo, and we've got testing out of the way. So now we just want to kind of integrate the two to make sure that things are always tested before we check them in a final time, so we're not checking in junk. Now, you can always check in code as you're working on it just so you don't lose it, but for that final, like the push to GitHub, you might want to run just one more test, make sure everything works, and then go ahead and check it in and push it to the cloud. So that's where agents come in. So there's a bunch of different ways you could do this. You could run all those scripts by hand, make sure all the tests are being run, and then ask it to check everything in. But that sounds like a repeatable task, and that sounds like a thing you have to remember. And so this seems like an obvious use for an agent. So that's what I did. I created an agent called E2E Test Validator, end-to-end test validator. But I didn't just want this in my project. I wanted this at a higher level. So I put this at my user level, at sort of the global level. So now all projects that I create going forward, I will have access to this agent. So this will run all the end-to-end tests in a given project, make sure all the code passes the test, and then check it into Git. Your role is to be the final quality gate before code enters the repository. This is the gatekeeper saying. So I did notice when I'm looking through this, it talks about checking into Git. It does not talk about pushing it up to GitHub. So I do think maybe I want to change that. So I am noting in my E2E test validator agent, it is checking things into Git, but I actually also want it to push up to GitHub once all the code has passed the suite of tests. I'm not actually sure I can do this. I don't know if I can edit agents that way. Nice. I wasn't sure if I had to go in through the /agents command and go edit an agent, or if I had to do something in the file, but looks like, once again, just asking Claude to do the thing that I want it to do is the right choice. It's checking that sensitive information isn't included. So that looks awesome. All right, so that's cool. I made that change, but now I need to test the thing that I changed to make sure that things get tested before they get checked in. Right. So I may as well take this opportunity to change something just a little bit in the Magic 8 Ball web app. All right, so let's make a simple little change. Could you also add an option so that the user could select a randomized question to pre-populate into the text box? I do want the user still to be able to type if they want to, but could you come up with a list of like maybe 20 questions that could just go into that box, and the user could select a random question and use that for the app? Thanks. This is kind of actually for when I'm testing it, but also I thought it might be kind of fun to see what kind of questions Claude would come up with to ask the Yogi Berra Magic 8 Ball. I can see now it's updating the unit tests to cover random question functionality. That's good. That was something I was not sure if I would have to manually remind Claude to do, or if that was part of its whole full testing was actually making sure that the tests get updated. It's like, who tests the tester? Claude does. Update end-to-end test to cover random question feature. Awesome. All right, so you can see the just unit test passed, the 90 Playwright end-to-end passed, and they added, it used to be 70, they've added a bunch of new tests because of the new functionality. So we do want to kind of take a quick peek at this. This is supposed to be a baseball, in case you were wondering. All right, so random question. Should I take that risk? I usually take a 2-hour nap from 1 to 4. Okay, that's a very Yogi Berra answer. Good answer. So that looks good to me, and based on my, 2-button click testing, I would say looks fine. But if you're curious about what that complete end-to-end testing looks like, we can just ask it. Can you run that end-to-end testing in headed mode? So I don't think you'll see all of them. I think some of them will pop up off the screen, but all right, so you can see how fast those are popping up and disappearing, in and out of focus, just all over the place. It's even got the mobile version. That's amazing. So again, I sort of knew this was possible in a real production environment, at an enterprise level. I did not know I had access to this level of testing. Astonishing. So what were we doing? All right, so if you recall, this was all in service of testing this end-to-end test validator. Can you run the end-to-end test validator agent? So I just want to make sure that the change that I made to that file works as I expected. So it is going to run all of those tests again, which I know is strange because we just ran them. But if I had been working in something, I could easily have introduced an error if I was manually editing any of these files that I didn't mean to. So if in my head this is the code that's going to production, I actually do want it to run those tests like just one more time, double check that I didn't accidentally have a file open and hit the enter key when I wasn't paying attention. All right, so you can see it is trying to commit the code to Git. If all tests pass, Stage changes and create appropriate commit message. Check and done. All right, excellent. So what is now on GitHub? Basically everything that we just changed. Awesome. So at this point, we are done. We are right where I wanted to be. One more thing though. Remember this guy, the end-to-end test validator that lives way up in my project level? I actually want to make sure that is in Git as well, and possibly GitHub. Because this is something that I'm going to rely on for my projects going forward, I want to make sure this is saved. So, can you make sure that those changes are checked into Git? And it's going to tell me, what do you mean? There is no Git repo. What would you like to do? You can either initialize a Git repository, or I can help you. Can you help me set that up? And like magic, it is going to set up the initial repository and make sure that all the files that need to go in there are properly documented and commented and checked in. And I don't have to worry about any of that. So now everything is in Git, so that means it's stored and backed up locally, and it is asking, do you want help setting up a GitHub remote repository? So again, this would be putting all of my changes in the cloud, just as a secondary backup. Yes. And it will go off on its merry little way and take care of that for me. So we got those major pieces accomplished today. We got everything checked into Git, and then we got everything in Git backed up to the cloud so that it is safe and sound in case something happens to my computer. And then we implemented full end-to-end testing with a set of tools that I have never used before and hadn't even heard of until today. So these are the little like nuts and bolts of a project that make it just more robust and sort of real. It takes it out of the realm of just a little sandbox toy or an educational proof of concept and really turns it into sort of a more robust, fully developed, production-ready app. And that was my goal for today. So I think we can call that a success. All right, that's it for today. I will be tackling deployment in the future, so hit like and subscribe if you're interested in being notified about when that video drops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.